Hey everyone, we talk a lot about tolerance, right? Especially at work, it's held up as this core virtue. But what if I told you it's not always a good thing? A really fascinating new study digs into what it actually feels like to be tolerated. And believe me, the results are not what you'd expect.
I mean, think about it. When you're on a team, is it really enough for your colleagues to just put up with your ideas or your work style? Or do you need something more than that? This is the big question these researchers decided to tackle. The common wisdom is super clear on this. For any diverse team to work, whether we're talking different values, personalities, or whatever, we're told tolerance is the glue. It's what keeps the peace and lets everyone get the job done without conflict.
But here's where it gets interesting. The researchers behind the study basically said, hold on a minute. From the perspective of the person being tolerated, the whole experience can feel pretty negative. It kind of sends this subtle message of disapproval, like who you are is something to be endured, not actually valued. So, this is the most crucial part to understand, the difference between acceptance and tolerance. Acceptance is the whole package, right? People include you in what they're doing, and they have a genuinely positive attitude about it. They actually value your difference. Tolerance, on the other hand, well, that's different. The behavior is still inclusive, sure, but the attitude underneath it is negative. It's that feeling of, ugh, fine, you can be part of this, but they don't really want you to be. It's begrudging inclusion.
So, how on earth do you measure such a subtle feeling? Well, they designed this really clever virtual team experiment to isolate and test exactly that. And this was no small test either. We're talking 440 participants. So, the findings have some serious statistical weight behind them, which makes the results way more reliable. Okay, let's break down how they did this, because it's pretty smart. First, they told every participant they had a people-oriented work style, which automatically put them in the minority. Then they joined their first team. Half of them landed in a group that was super accepting, and the other half, well, they faced outright rejection. Now here's the key part. After that, every single person was moved to a second team where they were just tolerated. This two-step process is what let the researchers see how the feeling of tolerance changes depending on what you just went through. And this brings us right to the heart of the study. It turns out the experience of being tolerated is not one size fits all. It has two completely different faces, and it all comes down to your previous experience. Let's start with that first group, the folks who were initially rejected by their first team. For them, moving to a new team that simply tolerated them was a huge change. And this data shows it all. When tolerance came after rejection, participants' negative feelings just plummeted. It was a massive relief. For this group, just being included, even if it was a little begrudgingly, felt like a giant improvement. It was a clear, definite step up. But what about the other group? These were the people who started out in a team that fully accepted and valued them. How did they feel when they moved to a team that just tolerated them?
For this group, the experience was the total opposite. As you can see, moving from acceptance to mere tolerance felt like a loss. Their negative well-being actually increased. Being put up with was a clear step down from being valued, and it just made them want to pull away and disengage from the team. But the study uncovered something else, something a little more subtle and maybe even more damaging. They called it the silencing effect. So get this, even when being tolerated felt bad, like it did for that group coming from an accepting team, it didn't empower them to speak up. This quote from the paper just captures that paradox perfectly. This chart makes it so clear. Just look at the bars for acceptance and tolerance. They're both low. This means people who were being tolerated were just as unwilling to complain as the people who were fully accepted, even though they felt worse. Now look at the rejection bar. It's way higher. The only people who felt empowered to actually voice their discontent were those who were flat out rejected. It seems like tolerance creates this weird situation where people just suffer in silence. It's a lot harder to complain about a bad attitude than it is to complain about obviously bad behavior. Okay, so what does all this mean for you and your team in the real world? Well, the implications are pretty significant for anyone who's actually trying to build an inclusive workplace. Let's just quickly sum up the big takeaways. First, context is everything. How tolerance feels totally depends on what came before. Second, if your team already has a great culture of acceptance, slipping into mere tolerance is a definite step backward, and it will hurt people's well-being. Third, if you're in a truly toxic environment, sure, introducing tolerance can be a good first step, But, and this is the really critical part, mere tolerance can silence people, hiding the real problems under the surface. And that leads to the final, most important point. The goal isn't just to tolerate differences. The goal is to build a culture of genuine appreciation and acceptance. And that leaves us with one last question to chew on. Take a look at your own team, your own organization. Are you creating an environment where people feel truly valued for who they are? Or are you, maybe without even realizing it, just settling for mere tolerance? The answer to that could make all the difference.